And now you have the Supreme Court that really just decided, it seems like on a political whim, to not hear this case, when clearly you have the interests of 80,000 American voters whose votes were disenfranchised based on the corruption, based on the ignoring the rules in these states. How they could pass on this, I think, is shocking. I think it's morally outrageous, and I'm glad to hear my co-counsel Mayor Giuliani say that the fight isn't finished. I don't know what was in the mind of these justices, but I think that Alito and Thomas were absolutely correct that when you have a case of original jurisdiction, you can't decline to hear it. And so the fact that they're saying that Texas and these other states who have now joined don't have standing, I think is a ridiculous political posture, and is simply trying to say we're going to decline to hear this on the merits based on some procedural just whim that they can kind of try to push this off. And I don't think that was the appropriate constitutional decision. And even if they had heard this on the merits and then ultimately decided the outcome differently than what we would have preferred and what the U.S. Constitution stands for, I think that they should have given Texas and all of these other states their day in court.
Where do you go from here? What is the president's path? And is there one?
Well, yes, there is. I think this case, well, the case wasn't rejected on the merits. The case was rejected on standing. So the answer to that is to bring the case now in the district court by the president, by some of the electors, alleging the same facts, where there would be standing, and therefore get a hearing. Because the worst part of this is basically the courts are saying they want to stay out of this, and they don't want to give us a hearing. They don't want the American people to hear these facts. And I think that's a terrible, terrible mistake. These facts will remain an open sore in our history unless they get resolved. They need to be heard. They need to be aired. And somebody needs to make a decision on whether they're true or false. And some court's going to have the courage to make that decision.
Mr. Mayor, I know you talked to the president just after this ruling came down. What's his reaction, and how's he doing through all of this?
The president's reaction is to look at other options. I mean, we always knew that this was an option, that we would have to convert this into, in fact, originally we thought about this as possibly 4 or 5 separate cases. So that's the option we're going to have to go to. There is nothing that prevents us from filing these cases immediately in the district court, in which the president, of course, would have standing. Some of the electors would have standing, in that their constitutional rights have been violated. And we really believe, above and beyond President Trump and Joe Biden, these facts need to be heard, because this kind of voter fraud can continue to go on if it's not nipped in the bud. If we don't stand up to it, if we allow the big media and the big tech and the Democrat politicians and the Washington elite, if we allow them to roll over this, election fraud is just going to get worse and worse and worse. I mean, this is the worst in our history so far, and it's got to be stopped. And I think the only person who has the courage to stand up to it is Donald Trump.
Yeah, there's no way to say it other than they dodged. They hid behind procedure, and they refused to use their authority to enforce the Constitution.
Here, Trump's lawyers and advisors Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis and Kayleigh McEnany react to the decisive ruling handed down by the Supreme Court, refusing to even hear the Texas-led case to overturn the election results in Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And to make matters worse, not a single justice publicly dissented, including the 3 justices that Donald Trump himself appointed. That's how much of a sideshow this lawsuit actually was. And look, they can all complain that the Supreme Court ruling was procedural and not on the merits, and so they'll reintroduce legislation in district courts. But here's the thing, that's of their own doing. They were the ones who used what's called original jurisdiction to go straight to the Supreme Court because, let's be honest, they thought that Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Gorsuch, Trump's appointments, would rule in their favor. In other words, they saw an opportunity where they thought they could skirt the rules and get an easy win. They lost, and now they're complaining that their brilliant strategy of appealing to the court they just packed wasn't the right move. But when you try to cheat the system, that is what you get. So if Giuliani and Kayleigh and Jenna Ellis want to complain to someone about it, they're the legal advisors, meaning they only have themselves to blame. Of course, that won't stop the Trump team from crying victim and airing their grievances on fringe conservative media channels, But the fact is that if ever there was a court that would have given this campaign the benefit of the doubt, it's this one. Again, Trump himself literally appointed a third of it. Now, Ellis does seize on the fact that Justices Alito and Thomas would have granted the motion to file, meaning they would have at least heard the case. If for no reason, then they have a long history of doing exactly that. But in the same ruling, they quite literally wrote, quote, but would not grant other relief, meaning they already made it clear that even if they did hear the case, they would have still voted against rescinding certification and blocking the electors from the 4 states from voting. Meaning any way Trump's legal advisors try to parse it, this was a clear and decisive loss. And look, Republicans will inevitably pretend that this isn't it and they can still find a way, but to put it bluntly, it is over. It was over weeks ago when the votes were counted. Joe Biden won the popular vote by 7 million votes. He won the Electoral College by a staggering 306 to 232. The state's elections have been certified. The Trump team and its allies have lost 56 out of 57 times in court, with their only win shortening a cure deadline from 9 to 6 days in Pennsylvania. So they can continue stringing along their supporters, but they're doing so knowing full well that there is a 0.0% chance that they'll overturn the results of this election. And by the way, they knew this Supreme Court case was their last chance. Trump himself even took to Twitter beforehand writing, quote, "We will be intervening in the Texas plus many other states case. This is the big one. Our country needs a victory." When he says this is the big one, he's conceding that this is the case that counts. And so a loss here is tantamount to a complete and total defeat for Donald Trump. But the issue here isn't only Trump, although he is without a doubt the ringleader of this entire anti-democratic circus. It's the 126 Republican lawmakers and 18 Republican-led states that signed onto this seditious lawsuit in the first place. A lawsuit so brazenly misguided that a 6-3 conservative court, stacked with Trump's own appointments, wouldn't even hear the case. That 2/3 of Republican lawmakers and a third of the states would put their names on what is likely the most seditious lawsuit to come before the Supreme Court in our lifetimes, a lawsuit arguing that millions of votes be nullified simply because they're not happy with the election results, is a testament to just how fundamentally opposed the Republican Party is to democracy. They'll hide behind their platitudes about the Constitution and law and order and freedom and liberty, but they don't care about any of that. They care about power. Period. So while this lawsuit is finished, and with Trump's other quote-unquote paths to victory vanishing faster than he can retweet a compliment about himself, the fact remains that there is a massive faction of the Republican Party that is openly, provably hostile to the very system of government they swore an oath to protect and the laws they swore an oath to uphold. And that's all they'll be remembered for. Their names etched onto that lawsuit, a lawsuit that, as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, now only serves as a living reminder of which elected officials on the right cashed in their legacy for a 12-hour fever dream of hoping that they could subvert the US Constitution before crashing back down to reality. So to those Republicans, I would just say enjoy that stain, because you'll be living with it for the rest of your lives. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.